In this lesson, lesson 3.9, our essential question is, repeat after me, how are number sentences used to show addition and subtraction situations? So what this means is, how are number sentences, addition or subtraction number sentences, used to show addition and subtraction word problems? So go ahead and open up your workbooks to page 211. Pause the video to do that if you need to. All right, on this page, the directions are asking you to write a story problem that could be solved using this bar model. Before you do that, I would like to talk first about the bar model that you are being given. And if you look, this bar model, there's two different ways to look at bar models, and we'll look and see which parts of the model we have. If you look, to do a subtraction problem, we might be given the larger amount, and we have a smaller amount. And what we're trying to find is the difference. So therefore, we would take the larger amount, the whole, and subtract the smaller amount, and we would find the difference, the answer to a subtraction problem. Or we could have a bar model where we're trying to find the sum or the whole, and we have one smaller amount and another smaller amount, which would be the add-ins. All right, so your story, when you write a word problem story, you need to make sure that you include a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I know this is something that you are working on in reading class. So you know that any good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So think of the parts of your bar model that you have. If you look, you have the whole, which could be the sum, or it could be that you're missing the difference, whichever way you'd like to look at it. And you have one of those smaller parts. You're missing this part. So again, you could look at this bar model as having the whole and subtracting the smaller part to get the difference. Or you can look at this as maybe a missing add-end is in the story, and you add another add-end, and you know that this is a sum. So it's up to you. Just make sure your story has a beginning, middle, and end. So go ahead and pause your video and take some time to write a story problem. If you remember that word problems start with a beginning, they have a middle, and then the end is always a question, what you're trying to find. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a model problem for you. I am sure that all of you have different word problems because the ideas for word problems are endless. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start by telling you that Katie had some marbles. That's how I'm going to start my story. Katie had some marbles, but I didn't tell you how many, but this is the beginning of my story, the beginning. So Katie had some marbles, so obviously this is the part that we do not know. Then her brother, so this is the middle of my story, her brother gave her 9 more marbles. That's the middle of my story. So again, the beginning, Katie had some marbles, but we don't know how many. Her brother gave her 9 more marbles. And at the end, now she has 15 marbles. My question is, how many marbles did Katie have to start? All right, so obviously if we think about the beginning, we know that Katie had some marbles. So I know that if I wrote a number sentence to show this, I would put a box. Katie had some marbles. Her brother gave her 9 more marbles, so I know that I would be adding that part because he gave her 9 more marbles. And now I know that she has 15 marbles. So what I'm trying to find is this missing add-end. I could also do this problem as a number sentence to find the difference. And I could also write a number sentence that looks like this, that she had 15 altogether, and if I subtract that 9 her brother gave her, I would find the other part, or the difference between what her brother gave her and what she had to begin with. So we could either add or subtract. This is going to be important as we start word problems, that you know that you can add or subtract. You just have to think about what's going on in the story. So if I look at this problem, I know that 6 plus 9 equals 15. So I know also that 15 minus 9 equals 6. So I know that Katie started with 6 marbles. All right, what I'd like you to do is open up your YouTube journal, and I would like you to add or subtract to solve your word problem, your story problem. I asked you to write a story problem. So what I want you to do now is write a number sentence, either adding or subtracting to find the answer to your word problem. Go ahead and pause the video and write in your YouTube journal. All right, so what I'd like you to do is open up to page 212 in your workbook, and we're going to talk about using number sentences to show a problem. So I'm going to read the story out loud to you. The story is, there were some girls and 4 boys at the park. There were 9 children in all. How many girls were at the park? So if you think about the beginning of the story, visualize this in your head. Remember, we've talked about closing your eyes and visualize. There were some girls at the park. So we know when we write a number sentence, we're going to write a placeholder, a box that's a placeholder for the missing number. So as you read the story, you're going to figure out which is the missing number based on what happens in the story. So there were some girls and 4 boys at the park. There were 9 children in all. So we know that this is going to be an addition number sentence if we put our placeholder for the missing girls right here, because we know that altogether there are 9 children. So we are adding something plus 4 to equal 9. So in your head, think 5 plus 4 equals 9. So there were 5 girls at the park. If you look at this, if you were to add 9 plus 4, you would be adding how many children in all to the number of boys, and that would equal 13. So it wouldn't make sense there would be 13 girls at the park if there were only 9 children in all. So the key to word problems is to make sure, and that's the end, to make sure that you follow what's going on in the story. So before you go down and do questions 1 and 2, I would like to look at one more word problem with you over on the next page. So look over on page 213. And on this page, we're going to read the story together, and we're going to think about what is going on at the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And then we're going to write a number sentence with a placeholder, and then we're going to solve. So I'd like you to close your eyes and visualize as I read this story. A group of children were flying 13 kites. Some kites were put away. Then the children were flying 7 kites. How many kites were put away? So let's go back and reread the story, and let's talk about what's going on at the beginning of the story so we know how to start the beginning of our number sentence. So the first sentence says, a group of children were flying 13 kites. So that is the beginning of our story. So what is the first number we're going to write? We are going to write 13 because a group of children were flying 13 kites. In the middle of our story, right here, it says some kites were put away. So if the kites were put away, are we going to add onto the 13 or are we going to take away? That's right, we're going to take away because if you put them away, you're taking them away. And then the end of our story says, then the children were flying 7 kites. And you know what? I forgot to do this part. So when we subtract, does it say how many kites were put away? No, it does not. So that is where we put our placeholder. We don't know how many they put away, but in the end, we know that the children were flying 7 kites. So we know that the ending of the story, there were 7 kites that were still being flown. So how many kites were put away? This is the number where the placeholder is that we are trying to find out. 13 minus how many were put away equals 7 kites still flying. So you can use whichever strategy you would like to solve this problem, but if you look, it's a missing add-in problem. So you can think to yourself, 7 plus what would equal 13? Pause the video and figure out how many kites were put away. That's right, 7 plus 6 equals 13. So 6 of the kites were put away. So if you go back and think about the story, make sure that this number would make sense in this placeholder. Would it make sense if there were 13 kites being flown, if 6 were put away, and there were 7 still being flown? Does that make sense? It does. If we would have added these two numbers together, though, 13 plus 7, that would equal 20. So would that make sense that 20 kites were put away when there were only 13 to begin with? That would not make sense. So make sure, again, that you're just following the beginning, middle, and end of the story and writing your number sentence as you follow the beginning, middle, and end. All right, I'd like you to go back and do problems number 1 and 2. And when you finish those problems, I'd like you to go over to the next page, page 213, and finish those problems, and then you can do the page 214. When you're done with that, you may go ahead and start your workstations.